Chapter 4 of this Buddha teaching book tells that after the enlightenment of Buddha, happy in this world is non attachment. Udana. In the memorable forenoon immediately preceding the morn of his enlightenment, as the Bodhisattva was seated under the Ajapala banyan tree in close proximity to the Bodhi tree, a generous lady named Sujata unexpectedly offered him some rice, milk rice, specially prepared by her with great care. This substantial meal he ate, and after his enlightenment, the Buddha fasted for 7 weeks and spent a quiet time in deep contemplation under the Bodhi tree and in its neighborhood. The 7 weeks. First week. Throughout the first week, the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree in one posture, experiencing the bliss of emancipation, Vimutti Sukha. For example, the fruit of Arahantaship. After those 7 days had elapsed, the Buddha emerged from the state of concentration and in the first watch of the night throughout reflected on the dependent arising paticca samupada in direct order thus. When these cows exist, this effect is with the arising of these cows. This effect arises dependent on ignorance or vija arise moral and immoral conditioning activities. Some kara. There are some footnotes. The famous people tree at Buddhi Gaya in northern India, which sheltered him during his struggle for enlightenment. Chapter 25 will refer about the footnote 2. Dependent on conditioning activities arises relinking consciousness, Vinana. Dependent on relinking consciousness arise mind and matter, Nama Rupa. Dependent on mind and matter arise the 6 spheres of sense, Salvatana. Dependent on the 6 sphere of senses arise contact, Phasa. Dependent on contact arises feeling, Vedana. Dependent on feeling arises craving, Tanha. Dependent on craving arises grasping, Upadana. Dependent on grasping arises becoming, Bhava. Dependent on becoming arises birth, Jati. Dependent on birth arises decay, Jara, death, Marana, sorrow, Shoka, lamentation, Parideva, pain, Dukkha, grief, Domanassa, and despair, Upayasa. Thus, in this whole mass of suffering originate. Thereupon the exalted one, knowing the meaning of this, uttered at that time this paean of joy. When indeed the truth become manifest unto the strenuous meditative Brahmana, then do all his doubts vanish away, since he knew the truth together with its cause. In the middle watch of the night, the exalted one thoroughly reflected on the dependent arising in reverse order thus: when this cause does not exist, this effect is not. With the cessation of this cause, this effect ceases. With the cessation of ignorance, conditioning activities cease. With the cessation of conditioning activities, relinking. Brahmin is a racial term which means one who studies the Vedas, generally applied to the priestly caste. Sometimes the Buddha used this term in the sense of one who has discarded evil assent. In this book, Brahma is used to denote a saint and Brahmin to denote a member of that particular caste. Consciousness ceases. With the cessation of relinking consciousness, mind and matter cease. With the cessation of mind and matter, the sixth sphere of sense cease. With the cessation of the sixth sphere of sense, contact cease. With the cessation of contact, feeling cease. With the cessation of feeling, craving ceases. With the cessation of craving, grasping ceases. With the cessation of grasping, becoming ceases. With the cessation of becoming, birth ceases. With the cessation of birth, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Thus does this whole mass of suffering cease. Thereupon the exalted one, knowing the meaning of this, uttered at that time this paean of joy. When indeed the truths become manifest onto the strenuous and meditative Brahmana, then all his doubt vanishes away, since he has understood the destruction of the causes. In the third watch of the night, the Exalted One reflected on the dependent arising in direct and reverse order. Thus, when this cause exists, this effect is. With the arising of this cause, this effect arises. When this cause does not exist, this effect is not. With the cessation of this cause, this effect ceases. Dependent on ignorance arise conditioning activities, and so forth. Thus does this whole mass of suffering arises. With the cessation of ignorance, conditioning activities cease, and so forth. Thus does this whole mass of suffering ceases. Thereupon the blessed one, knowing the meaning of this, uttered at that time this paean of joy. When indeed the truths become manifest onto the strenuous and meditative Brahmana, then he stands routing the host of the evil one, even as the sun illuminates the sky. Second week. The second week was uneventful, but he silently taught a great moral lesson to the world as a mark of profound gratitude to the inanimate Bodhi tree that sheltered him during his struggle for enlightenment. He stood at a certain distance, gazing at the tree with motionless eyes for one whole week. Following his noble example, his followers, in memory of his enlightenment, still venerate not only the original Bodhi tree but also its descendants. Third week, as the Buddha had not given up his temporary residence at the Bodhi tree, the Devas doubted his attainment to Buddhahood. The Buddha read their thoughts, and in order to clear their doubts, he created by his psychic power a jeweled ambulatory, a ratna, kam, kana, and paste up and down for another week. Fourth week. The fourth week he spent in a jeweled chamber, Ratnagara, contemplating the intricacies of the Abhidhamma, higher teaching. Footnote 4. On the spot where the Buddha stood, a Saitya has been erected by King Ashoka. This was named Animeslokena Saitya and is still to be seen. 5. The right hand branch of the original Bodhi tree, which was brought to Ceylon by Sanghamitta Theri and planted by King Davanampi Yatisa at Anuradhapura, the ancient capital of Ceylon, still exists in a flourishing condition, though more than 2200 years ago. So called because the Buddha reflected on the jewels of the Abhidhamma. Books state that his mind and body were so purified when he pondered on the book of relations, Patthana, the seventh treatise of the Abhidhamma, that six colored rays emitted from his body. Fifth week, during the fifth week too, the Buddha enjoyed the bliss of emancipation, Vimutti Sukha, seated in one posture under the famous Ajupala banyan tree in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree. When he arose from that transcendental state, a conceited Huhunkajatikia Brahmin approached him and, after the customary salutations and friendly greetings, questioned him thus: In what respect, O Venerable Gautama, does one become a Brahmana, and what are the conditions that make a Brahmana? The Buddha uttered this paean of joy and replied: That Brahmin who has discarded evil without conceit, Huhumka, free from defilements, self controlled, versed in knowledge, and who has led the holy life rightly, would call himself a Brahmana. For him, there is no elation anywhere in this world. According to the Jataka commentary, it was during this week that the daughters of Mara, Tanha, Arati, and Raga made a vain attempt to tempt the Buddha by their charms. Sixth week, from the Ajapala Banyan tree, the Buddha proceeded to the Mukalinda tree, where he spent the sixth week, again enjoying the bliss of emancipation, namely blue, Nila, yellow, Pitta, red, Lohita, white, Odatta, orange, Manjitra, and a mixture of these five colors, Pabhasara, Udana. These three cannot be personalized passions as the incident took place after the enlightenment. At that time, there arose an unexpected great shower, rain clouds, and gloomy weather, with cold winds prevailed for several days. Thereupon, Mukalinda, the serpent king, come out of his abode and coiling round the body of the Buddha 7 times, remained keeping his large hood over the head of the Buddha so that he may not be affected by the elements. At the close of 7 days, Mukalinda, seeing the clear, cloudless sky, uncoiled himself from around the body of the Buddha and, leaving his own form, took the guise of a young man and stood in front of the exalted one with clasped hands. Thereupon the Buddha uttered this paean of joy: Happy is seclusion to him who is contented, to him who has heard the truth, and to him who sees. Happy is goodwill in this world, and so is restraint towards all beings. Happy in this world is non attachment. the passing beyond of sense desires, the separation of the I am conceit is indeed the highest happiness. Seventh week. The seventh week, the Buddha peacefully passed at the Viraja Yatna tree, experiencing the bliss of emancipation, one of the first utterance of the Buddha. Through many a birth in existence wandered I, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. This cannot be a human being. The Vinaya text also cite an interesting story of a serpent who, assuming the form of a human being, lived for some times as a bhikkhu in robes. Sukho viveko tuthasa suta dhamma sapasato अव्यापाझं सुखं लोके पन्नभूतेषु संयमो सुख विरागतलोके कामनं समातिखम् अस्मिना मानस यो विनाय इत्थं वे परामं सुखम उदान. Sorrowful is repeated birth. O house builder, thou art seen. Thou shalt build no house again. All thy rafters are broken. Thy ridge pole is shattered. Mind attains the unconditioned. Achieved is the end of craving. At dawn on the very day of his enlightenment, the Buddha uttered this paean of joy, Udana, which vividly describes his transcendental moral victory and his inner spiritual experience. The Buddha admits his past wanderings in existence which entailed suffering, a fact that evidently proves the belief in rebirth. He was compelled to wander and consequently to suffer, as he could not discover the architect that built this house. The body, in his final birth, while engaged in solitary meditation, which he had highly developed in the course of his wanderings. After a relentless search, he discovered by his own intuitive wisdom the elusive architect residing not outside but within the recesses of his own heart. It was craving or attachment, a self creation, a mental element latent in all. How and when this craving originated is incomprehensible. What is created by oneself cannot be destroyed by oneself. The discovery of the architect is the eradication of craving by attaining arhanship, which in these verses is alluded to as end of craving. The rafters of this self created house are the passions, kilesha, such as attachment, lobha, aversion, dosha, illusion, moha, conceit, mana, false views, ditthi, doubt, vicikiccha, sloth, thina, restlessness, uddhacha, moral shamelessness, ahirika, moral fearlessness, anuttapa. Craving is tanha, body, passions, kilesha, ignorance, avijja, and nibbana. The ridge pole that supports the rafters represents ignorance, the root cause of all passions. The shattering of the ridge pole of ignorance by wisdom results in the complete demolition of the house. the ridge pole, and rafters are the material with which the architect builds this undesired house. With their destruction, the architect is deprived of the material to rebuild the house which is not wanted. With the demolition of the house of the mind for which there is no place in the analogy, attains the unconditioned state, which is nirvana. With whatever that is mundane is left behind, and only the supermundane state, nirvana, remains. Chapter 5, the invitation to expound the Dhamma. He who imbibes the Dhamma abides in happiness with mind pacified. The wise man ever delights in the Dhamma revealed by the Aryas, Dhammapada. The Dhamma as the teacher. On one occasion, soon after the enlightenment, the Buddha was dwelling at the foot of the Ajapala banyan tree by the bank of the Neranjara river. As he was engaged in solitary meditation, the following thoughts arose in his mind. Painful indeed is it to live without someone to pay reverence and show deference. How if I should live near an ascetic or Brahmin, respecting and reverencing him? Then it occurred to him, should I live near another ascetic or Brahmin, respecting and reverencing him, in order to bring morality, Silakhanda, to perfection? But I do not see in this world, including gods, Maras, and Brahmas, and amongst being, including ascetics, Brahmins, gods, and men, another ascetic or Brahmin who is superior to me in morality and with whom I could associate, respecting and reverencing him. Should I live near another ascetic or Brahmin, respecting and reverencing him, in order to bring concentration, samadhi, khanda, to perfection? But I do not see in this world any ascetic or Brahmin who is superior to me in concentration and with whom I should associate, respecting and reverencing him. Anguttara Nikaya, Part 2, page 20, Gradual Sayings, Part 2, page 20. Should I live near another ascetic or Brahmin, respecting and reverencing him in order to bring wisdom, Pannakhandra, to perfection? But I do not see in this world any ascetic or Brahmin who is superior to me in wisdom and with whom I should associate, respecting and reverencing him. Should I live near another ascetic or Brahmin, respecting and reverencing him in order to bring emancipation, Vimuttikhanda, to perfection? But I do not see in this world any ascetic or Brahmin who is superior to me in emancipation and with whom I should associate, respecting and reverencing him. Then it occurred to him, how if I should live respecting and reverencing this very Dhamma which I myself have realized? Thereupon, Brahma Sahampati, understanding with his own mind the Buddha's thought, just as a strong man would stretch his bent arm or bend his stretched arm, even so did he vanish from the Brahma realm and appeared before the Buddha, and covering one shoulder with his upper robe and placing his right knee on the ground, he saluted the Buddha with clasped hands and said thus, It is so, O exalted one, it is so. O accomplished one, O Lord, the worthy, supremely enlightened ones, who were in the past. They live respecting and reverencing this very Dhamma, the worthy, supremely enlightened ones who will be in the future will also live respecting and reverencing this very Dhamma. O Lord, may the exalted one, the worthy, supremely enlightened one of the present age, also live respecting and reverencing this very Dhamma. This the Brahma Sampati said, and uttering which furthermore he spoke as follows: those enlightened ones of the past, those of the future, and those of the present age who dispel the grief of many, all of them lived, will live, and are living respecting the noble Dhamma. This is the characteristics of the Buddhas. Therefore, he who desires his welfare and expects his greatness should certainly respect the noble Dhamma, remembering the message of the Buddhas. This the Brahma Sampati said, and after which he respectfully saluted the Buddha and passing round him to the right disappeared immediately. As the Sangha is also endowed with greatness, there is also his reverence towards the Sangha. The invitation to expound the Dhamma. From the foot of the Rajayatna tree, the Buddha proceeded to the Ajapala Banyan tree, and as he was absorbed in solitary meditation, the following thoughts occurred to him: this Dhamma which I have realized is indeed profound, difficult to perceive, difficult to comprehend, tranquil, exalted, not within the sphere of logic, subtle, and is to be understood by the wise. These beings are attached to material pleasures. This casually connected, dependent arising is a subject which is difficult to comprehend. And this Nibbana, the cessation of the condition, the abandoning of all passion, the destruction of craving, the non attachment, and the cessation is also a matter not easily comprehensible. This discourse was delivered by the Buddha while residing at Jetavana, Savatthi, long after the establishment of the order of the Sangha. He showed his reference towards the Sangha by requesting the Queen Mahapajapati Gautami to offer to the Sangha the robe especially prepared by him. If I too were to teach this Dhamma, the others would not understand me. That will be wearisome to me, that will be tiresome to me. Then these wonderful verses, unheard of before, occurred to the Buddha. With difficulty have I comprehended the Dhamma. There is no need to proclaim it now. This Dhamma is not easily understood by those who are dominated by lust and hatred. The lust ridden, shrouded in darkness, do not see this Dhamma, which goes against the stream, which is abstruse, profound, difficult to perceive, and subtle. As the Buddha reflected, thus he was not dispensed to expound the Dhamma. Thereupon Brahma Sampati read the thoughts of the Buddha, and fearing that the world might perish without not hearing the Dhamma, approached him and invited him to teach the Dhamma thus: O Lord, may the exalted one expound the Dhamma. May the accomplished one expound the Dhamma. There are beings with little dust in their eyes who, not hearing the Dhamma, will fall away. There will be those who understand the Dhamma. Furthermore, he remarked, in ancient times there arose in Magadha a Dhamma, impure thoughts out by the corrupted, upon this door to the deathless state. May they hear the Dhamma understood by the stainless one, just as one standing on the summit of a rocky mountain would behold the people around. Even so may the all-seeing wise one ascend this palace of Dhamma. May the sorrowless one look upon the people who are plunged in grief and are overcome by birth and decay. Rise, O hero, victor in battle, caravan leader, and debt-free one, and wonder in the world. May the exalted one teach the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand the Dhamma. When he said, so the exalted one spoke to him thus. The following thoughts, O Brahma, occurred to me. This Dhamma, which I have comprehended, is not easily understood by those who are dominated by lust and hatred. The lust ridden, shrouded in darkness, do not see this Dhamma, which goes against the stream, which is absurd, abstruse, profound, difficult to perceive, and subtle. As I reflect thus, my mind turned into inaction and not to the teaching of the Dhamma. Brahma Sampati appealed to the Buddha for the second time and he made the same reply. When he appealed to the Buddha for the third time, the exalted one, out of pity for beings, surveyed the world with his Buddha vision. As he surveyed, thus he saw beings with little and much dust in their eyes, with keen and dull intellect, with good and bad characteristics, beings who are easy and beings who are difficult to be taught, and few others who with fear view evil and a life beyond. As in the case of a blue, red, or white lotus pond, some lotuses are born in the water, grow in the water, remains immersed in the water, and thrive plunged in the water. Some are born in the water, grow in the water, and remain on the surface of the water. Some others are born in the water, grow in the water, and remain emerging out of the water, unstained by the water. Even so, as the exalted one surveyed the world with his Buddha vision, he saw beings with little and much dust in their eyes, with keen and dull intellect, with good and bad characteristics, beings who are easy and difficult to be taught, and few others who with fear view evil and a life beyond. And he addressed the Brahma Sampati in a verses thus. Praloka Vajji Bhaya Dasavino. Open to them are the doors to the deathless state. Let those who have ears repose confidence, being aware of the weariness. O Brahma, I did not teach amongst men this glorious and excellent Dhamma. The delighted Brahma, thinking that he made himself the occasion for the exalted one to expound the Dhamma, respectfully saluted him and passing round him to the right disappeared immediately. The first to converse after his memorable fast for 49 days, as the Buddha sat under the Rajayatna tree, two merchants, Tapasu and Bhallika from Ukkala, Orissa, happened to pass that way. Then a certain deity, who was a blood relative to theirs in a past birth, spoke to them as follows. The exalted one, good sirs, is dwelling at the foot of the Rajayatna tree soon after his enlightenment. Go and serve the exalted one with flour and honeycomb. It will conduce to your well beings and happiness for a long time. Availing themselves of this golden opportunity, the two delighted merchants went to the exalted one and, respectfully saluting him, implored him to accept their humble alms so that it may resound to their happiness and well being. अपरुत्तत्तसम् अमातस्स दवारया शोतवन्त पमोञ्चकन्तु सद्धम् See Majjhima Nikaya Ariya Pariya Sena Sutta. Devatas, Pali, are terrestrial or celestial deities, a class of beings who, as a rule, are invisible to the physical eye. This particular famine deity has been related to the merchants in a previous birth. It is interesting to note the non human elements appearing in various places connected with the life of the Buddha. Sattu, fried flour, and madhu, honey, were a regular diet of travelers in India in ancient days. Then it occurred to the Exalted One that the Tathagatas do not accept food with their hands. How shall I accept this flour and honeycomb? Forthwith the four great kings understood the thoughts of the Exalted One with their minds, and from the four directions offered him four grantil bowls, saying, O Lord, may the Exalted One accept herewith this flour and honeycomb. The Buddha graciously accepted the timely gift which, with which he received the humble offerings of the merchants and ate his food after his long fast. After the meal was over, the merchants protested themselves before the feet of the Buddha and said, We, O Lord, seek refuge in the Exalted One and the Dhamma. May the Exalted One treat us as lay disciples who have sought refuge from today till death. These were the first lay disciples of the Buddha who embraced Buddhism by seeking refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma, reciting the twofold formula. Kattumaharari Jikas, the guardian deities of the four quarters. The commentary states that the Buddha wished that the four vowels be amalgamated into one. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, I seek refuge in the Buddha. Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, I seek refuge in the Dhamma, is the twofold formula. As the Sangha or the noble order was not in existence, then they did not recite the third, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami, I seek refuge in the Sangha. One becomes a Buddhist by intelligently reciting the three refuges. The Jataka commentary relates that when these two first converts begged of the Buddha to give them an object of worship, the Buddha towed his head and presented them some hair relics. It is believed that these relics have been enshrined in the modern Shaw Dagon Pagoda in Rangoon, the pride and glory of Burmese Buddhists. This bell shaped massive Saitya appears like a golden mountain from a distance. On the way to Banaras to teach the Dhamma, on accepting the invitation to teach the Dhamma, the first thought that occurred to the Buddha before he embarked on his great mission was, To whom shall I teach the Dhamma first? Who will understand the Dhamma quickly? Well, there is Alar Kalama, who is learned, clever, wise, and has for long been with little dust in his eyes. How if I were to teach the Dhamma to him first? He will understand the Dhamma quickly. Then a deity appeared before the Buddha and said, Lord Alar Kalama died a week ago. With his supernormal vision, he perceived that it was so. Then he thought of Udaka Ramaputta. Instantly, a deity informed him that he died the evening before. With his supernormal vision, he perceived this to be so. Ultimately, the Buddha thought of the five energetic ascetics who attended on him during his struggle for enlightenment. With his supernormal vision, he perceived that they were residing in the deer park at Ishipatna near Banaras. So the Buddha stayed at Uruvela till such times as he was pleased to set out for Banaras. The Buddha was traveling on the highway when between Gaya and the Bodhi tree, beneath whose shade he attained enlightenment, a wandering ascetic named Upaka saw him and addressed him thus: extremely clear are your senses, friend. The first religious teacher who taught the Bodhisatta the jnanas extending up to the realm of nothingness, Akinchanayatana. The second religious teacher who taught the Bodhisatta the highest state of mundane mental development, the realm of neither perception nor non perception, Neva Sannam Asannayatana. And he addressed him thus: extremely clear are your senses, friend. Pure and clean is your complexion. On account of whom has your renunciation been made, friend? Who is your teacher? Whose doctrine do you profess? The Buddha replied, all have I overcome, all do I know. From all am I detached, all have I renounced. Wholly absorbed am I in the destruction of the cravings. Arahanta Shiva. Having comprehended all by myself, whom shall I call my teacher? No teacher have I, and equal to me there is not. In the world, including gods, there is no rival to me. Indeed, an arahant am I in this world. An unsurpassed teacher am I. Alone am I, the all enlightened. Cool and appeased am I to establish the field of Dharma to the city of Kasi. I go. In this blind world, I shall beat the drum of deathlessness. Then, friend, do you admit that you are an arhat, a limitless conqueror? Queried Upaka. Like me are conquerors who have attended to the destructions of defilements. All the evil conditions have I conquered, hence Upaka. I am called a conqueror, replied the Buddha. It may be so, friend, Upaka curtly remarked, and nodding his head, turned into a by road and departed. Unperturbed by the first rebuff, the Buddha journeyed from place to place and arrived in due course at the deer park in Banaras. The Buddha uttered these words because he attained enlightenment by himself without the aid of a teacher. He had teachers before his enlightenment, but nobody taught him the way to attain Buddhahood. It is therefore not correct to say that Buddhism is a natural outgrowth of Hinduism. Majjhima Nikaya, Aryapariyasena Sutta. Then meeting the five monks, the five ascetics who saw him coming from afar decided not to pay him due respect as they misconstrued his discontinuance of rigid ascetic practices, which proved absolutely futile during his struggle for enlightenment. They remarked, friends, this ascetic Gautama is coming. He is luxurious. He has given up striving and has turned into a life of abundance. He should not be greeted and waited upon. His bowel and robe should not be taken. Nevertheless, a seat should be prepared If he wishes, let him sit down. However, as the Buddha continued to draw near, his august personality was such that they were compelled to receive him with due honor. One came forward and took his bowel and robe, another prepared a seat, and yet another kept water for his feet. Nevertheless, they addressed him by name and called him friend. Abusho, a form of address applied generally to juniors and equals. At this, the Buddha addressed them thus: do not, O bhikkhus, address the Tathagata by name or by the title Abusho. An exalted one, O bhikkhus, is the Tathagata. A fully enlightened one is he. Give ear, O bhikkhus. Deathlessness, amatta, has been attained. I shall instruct and teach the Dhamma. If you act according to me instructions, you will before long realize by your own intuitive wisdom and live attaining in this life itself that supreme consummation of the holy life, for the sake of which sons of noble families rightly leave the household for homelessness. Thereupon the five ascetics replied, by the demeanor of yours, Abhusha Gautama, by that discipline, by those painful austerities, you did not attain to any superhuman specific knowledge and insight worthy of an Arya. How will you, when you have become luxurious, have given up striving, and have turned into a life of abundance, gain any such superhuman specific knowledge and insight worthy of an Arya? In explanation, the Buddha said that the Tathagata, O bhikkhus, is not luxurious, has not given up striving, and has not turned into a life of abundance. An exalted one is the Tathagata. A fully enlightened one is he. Give ear, O bhikkhus, deathlessness has been attained. I shall instruct and teach the Dhamma. If you act according to my instructions, you will before long realize by your own intuitive wisdom and live attaining in this life itself that supreme consummation of the holy life, for the sake of which sons of noble families rightly leave the household for homelessness. For the second time, the prejudiced ascetics expressed their disappointments in the same manner. For the second time, the Buddha reassured them of his attainments to enlightenment. When the adamant ascetics, refusing to believe him, expressed their views for the third time, the Buddha questioned them thus: do you know, O bhikkhus, of an occasion when I ever spoke to you thus before? Nay, indeed, Lord. The Buddha repeated for the third time that he had gained enlightenment and that they also could realize the truth if they would act according to his instructions. It was indeed the frank utterance issuing from the sacred lips of the Buddha. The cultured ascetics, thought adamant in their views, were then fully convinced of the great achievements of the Buddha and of his competence to act as their moral guide and teacher. They believed his word and sat in silence to listen to his noble teachings. Two of the ascetics the Buddha instructed, while three went out for alms. With what the three ascetics bowed from their alms round the six maintained themselves, three of the ascetics he instructed, while two ascetics went out for alms. With what the two bowed, six sustained themselves. And those five ascetics thus admonished and instructed by the Buddha, being themselves subject to birth, decay, death, sorrow, and passion, realize the real nature of life and seeking out the birthless, decayless, diseaseless, deathless, sorrowless, passionless, incomparable supreme peace, Nibbana, attain the incomparable security, Nibbana, which is free from birth, decay, disease, death, sorrow, and passion. The knowledge arose in them that their deliverance was unshakable, that it was their last birth, and that there would be no more of this state again. Dhammachakra Parivartana Sutra, which deals with the Four Noble Truths, was the first discourse delivered by the Buddha to them. Hearing it, Kondana, the eldest, attained the first stage of sainthood after receiving further instructions. The other four attained Sotapatti. Later, on hearing the Antalakkhana Sutta, which deals with soullessness, all the five attained Arhantaship, the final stage of sainthood. The first five disciples, the five learned monks who thus attained Arhantship and became the Buddha's first disciple were Kondana, Bhadya, Vappa, Mahanama, and Asaji of the Brahmin clan. Here are footnotes like for 16 you can see chapter 6, 17 lit stream winner, 18 see chapter 6. Kondana was the youngest and the cleverest of the 8 Brahmins who were summoned by King Sudodhana to name the infant prince. The other 4 were the sons of those older Brahmins. All these 5 retired to the forest as ascetic in anticipation of the Bodhisattva while he was endeavoring to attain Buddhahood. When he gave up his useless penances and severe austerities and began to nourish the body sparingly to regain his lost strength, these favorite followers, disappointed at his change of method, deserted him and went to Isipatna. Soon after their departure, the Bodhisattva attended Buddhahood. The Venerable Kondana became the first Arihant as the most senior member of the Sangha. It was Asaji, one of the 5 who converted the great Sariputta, the chief disciple of the Buddha. Then chapter 6, Dhammachakra Parivartana Sutra, the 5 discourse. The best of paths is the Eightfold Path. The best of truths are the 4 sayings. Non-attachment is the best of states. The best of bipeds is the seeing one. Dhammapada. Introduction. Ancient India was noted for distinguished philosophers and religious teachers who held diverse views with regard to life and its goal. Brahmajala Sutta of the Digha Nikaya mentions 62 varieties of philosophical theories that prevailed in the time of the Buddha. One extreme view that was diametrically opposed to all current religious beliefs was the nihilistic teachings of the materialistics, who were also termed Charvakas, after the name of the founder. According to ancient materialism, which in Pali and Sanskrit was known as Lokayata, man is annihilated after death, leaving behind him whatever force generated by him. In their opinion, death is the end of all. This present world alone is real. Eat, drink, and be merry, for death comes to all, appears to be the ideal of their system. Virtue, they say, is a delusion, and enjoyment is the only reality. Religion is a foolish aberration, a mental disease. there was a distrust of everything good, high, pure, and compassionate. Their theory stands for sensualism and selfishness and the gross affirmation of the loud will. There is no need to control passion and instincts since they are the nature's legacy to man. See Sri Radhakrishnan, Indian Philosophy, Volume 1, page 281-82. Another extreme views was that emancipation was possible only by leading a life of strict asceticism. This was purely a religious doctrine, firmly held by the ascetics of the highest order. The five monks that attended on the Bodhisattva during his struggle for enlightenment tenaciously adhered to this belief. In accordance with this view, the Buddha, too, before his enlightenment, subjected himself to all forms of austerity. After an extraordinary struggle for 6 years, he realized the utter futility of self mortification. Consequently, he changed his unsuccessful hard course and adopted a middle way. His favorite disciple thus lost confidence in him and deserted him, saying, the ascetic Gautama had become luxurious, had ceased from striving, and had returned to a life of comfort. Their unexpected desertion was definitely a material loss to him as they ministered to all his needs. Nevertheless, he was not discouraged. The iron willed Bodhisattva must have probably felt happy for being left alone. With unabated enthusiasm and with restored energy, he persistently strove until he attained enlightenment, the object of his life. Precisely 2 months after his enlightenment, on the Ashar- Ashalha July full moon day, the Buddha delivered his first discourse to the five monks that attended on him. The first discourse of the Buddha, Dhammachakra, is the name given to this first discourse of the Buddha. It is frequently represented as meaning the kingdom of truth, the kingdom of righteousness, the will of truth. According to the commentators, Dhamma here means wisdom or knowledge, and Chakka means founding or establishment. Dhammachakka therefore means the founding or establishment of wisdom. Dhammachakka Parivartana means the exposition of the establishment of wisdom. Dhamma may also be interpreted as truth and Chakka as wheels. Dhamma Chakka Parivartana would therefore means the turning or the establishment of the wheel of truth. In this most important discourse, the Buddha expounds the middle path which he himself discovered and which forms the essence of his new teaching. He opened the discourse by exhorting the five monks who believe in strict asceticism to avoid the extremes of self indulgence and self mortification, as both do not lead to perfect peace and enlightenment. The former retards one's spiritual progress, the latter weakens one's intellect. He criticized both views as he realized by personal experience their futility and enunciated the most practicable, rational, and beneficial path which alone leads to perfect purity and absolute deliverance. This discourse was expounded by the Buddha while he was residing at the Deer Park in Ishipatna near Banaras. The intellectual five monks who were closely associated with the Buddha for 6 years were the only human beings that were present to hear the sermon. Books state that many invisible beings, such as devas and Brahmins, also took advantage of the golden opportunity of listening to these sermons. As Buddhists believe in the existence of realm other than this world, inhabited by beings with subtle bodies, imperceptible to the physical eye. Possibly many devas and Brahmins were also present on this great occasion. Nevertheless, it is clear that the Buddha was directly addressing the five monks and the discourse was intended mainly for them. At the outset, the Buddha cautioned them to avoid the two extremes. His actual words were There are two extremes, anta, which should not be restored to by a recluse, pabajitena. Special emphasis was laid on the two term anta, which means end or extreme, and pabajita, which means one who has renounced the world. One extreme, in this Buddha's own words, was the constant attachment to sensual pleasures, kama sukha likan yoga. The Buddha described this extreme as base, vulgar, worldly, ignorable, and profitless. This should not be misunderstood to mean that the Buddha expects all his followers to give up material pleasures and retire to a forest without enjoying this life. The Buddha was not so narrow minded. Whatever the deluded sensualist may feel about it, to the dispassionate thinker, the enjoyment of sensual pleasures is distinctly short lived, never completely satisfying, and result is unpleasant reactions. Speaking of worldly happiness, the Buddha says that the acquisition of wealth and the enjoyment of possessions are two sources of pleasure for a layman. An understanding recluse would not, however, see delight in the pursuit of these fleeting pleasures. To the surprise of the average man, he might shun them. What constitutes pleasure to the former is a source of alarm to the latter, to whom renunciation alone is pleasure. The other extreme is the constant addiction to self mortification. Atta Kilama Tanna Yoga. Commenting on this extreme, which is not practiced by the orderly man, the Buddha remarks that it is painful, ignoble, and profitless. Unlike the first extreme, this is not described as base, worldly, and vulgar. The selection of these three terms is very stringent. As a rule, it is the sincere recluse who had renounced this attachment to sensual pleasures that resorts to this painful method, mainly with the object of gaining his deliverance from the ills of life. The Buddha, who has had painful experience of this profitless course, describes it as useless. It only multiplies suffering instead of diminishing it. The Buddha and Arhants are described as Aryas, meaning nobles, Anaryas, ignorable. Anaryas, ignoble, may therefore be construed as not characteristics of the Buddha and Arhants who are free from passions. Atha means the ultimate good, which for a Buddhist is Nibbana, the complete emancipation from suffering. Therefore, Anatha Samhita may be construed as not conductive to ultimate good. The Buddha at first cleared the issue and removed the false notions of his hearers. When their troubled mind became pliable, the receptive, the Buddha related his personal experience with regard to these two extremes. The Buddha says that he, the Tathagata, realizing the error of both these two extremes, followed a middle path. This new path or way was discovered by himself. The Buddha termed his new system Majjhima Patipada, the middle way, to persuade his disciples to give heed of his new path. He spoke of its various blessings. Unlike the two diamen- diametrically opposite extremes, this middle path produces spiritual insight and intellectual wisdom to see things as they truly are. When the insight is clarified and the intellect is sharpened, everything is seen is in its true perspective. Furthermore, unlike the first extreme, which stimulates passions, this middle way leads to the subjugation of passions which result in peace. Above all, it leads to the attainments of the four supermundane paths of sainthood, to the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and finally to the realization of the ultimate goal, Nibbana. Now, what is the middle way? The Buddha replies, It is the Noble Eightfold Path. The eight factors are then enumerated in the discourse. The first factor is right understanding, the keynote of Buddhism. The Buddha started with right understanding in order to clear the doubts of the monks and guide them on the right way. Right understanding deals with the knowledge of oneself as one really is. It leads to right thoughts of non attachment or renunciation. Nekkhamma Samkappa, loving kindness. Abhyapada Samkappa, and harmlessness. Avihimsa Samkappa, which are opposed to selfishness, ill will, and cruelty, respectively. Right thoughts result in right speech, right action, and right livelihood, which three factors perfect one's morality. The sixth factor is right effort, which deals with the elimination of evil states and the development of good state in oneself. This self purification is best done by a careful introspection for which right mindfulness, the seventh factor, is essential. Effort combined with mindfulness produces right concentration or one pointlessness of the mind, the eighth factor. A one pointed mind resembles a polished mirror where everything is clearly reflected with no distortion. Prefacing the discourse with the two extremes and his newly discovered middle way, the Buddha expounded the Four Noble Truths in detail. Sakka is a Pali term for truth. Satya is the Pali term for truth, which means that which is. Its Sanskrit equivalent is Satya, which denotes an incontrovertible fact. The Buddha enunciated four such truths, the foundation of his teaching, which are associated with the so called being. Hence, his doctrine is homocentric, opposed to theocentric religions. It is introvert and not extrovert. Whether the Buddha arises or not, these truths exist, and it is a Buddha that reveals them to the deluded world. They do not and cannot change with time because they are eternal truths. The Buddha was not indebted to anyone for his realization of them. As he himself remarked in this discourse, thus, with regard to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. These words are very significant because they testify to the originality of his new teaching. Hence, there is no justification in the statement that Buddhism is a natural outgrowth of Hinduism, although it is true that there are some fundamental doctrines common to both systems. These truths are in Pali termed Arya Satchani. They are so called because they were discovered by the great Arya, that is, one who is far removed from passions. The first noble truth deals with dukkha, which, for need of a better English equivalent, is inappropriately rendered by suffering or sorrow. As a feeling, dukkha means that which is difficult to be endured. As an abstract truth, dukkha is used in the sense of contemptible, do, emptiness, kha. The world rests on suffering, hence it is contemptible. It is devoid of any reality, hence it is empty or void. Dukkha therefore means contemptible void. Average men are only surface seers, and Arya sees things as they truly are. To an Arya, all life is suffering, and he finds no real happiness in this world, which deceives mankind with illusory pleasures. Material happiness is merely the gratification of some desire. All are subject to birth, jati, and consequently to decay, jara, disease, vyadhi, and finally to death, marana. No one is exempt from these four causes of suffering. Wish unfulfilled is also suffering. As a rule, one does not wish to be associated with things or persons one detests, nor does one wish to be separated from things or persons one likes. One's cherished desires are not, however, always gratified. At times, what one least expects or what one least desires is thrust upon oneself. Such unexpected, unpleasant circumstances become so intolerable and painful that weak, ignorant people are compelled to commit suicide as if such an act would solve the problem. Real happiness is found within and is not to be defined in terms of wealth, power, honors, or conquests. If such worldly possessions are forcibly or unjustly obtained or are misdirected or even viewed with attachment, they become a source of pain and sorrow for the possessors. Normally, the enjoyment of sensual pleasures is the highest and only happiness of the average person. There is no doubt some momentary happiness in the anticipation, gratification, and retrospection of such fleeting material pleasures, but they are illusory and temporary. According to the Buddha, non attachments, Viragata, or the transcending of material pleasures, is a great bliss. In brief, this composite body, Pankupadanakhandha, itself is a cause of suffering. There are three kinds of cravings. The first is the grossest form of craving, which is simple attachment to all sensual pleasures, Kamatanha. The second is attachment to existence, Bhavatanha. The third is attachment to non existence, Vibhavatanha. According to the commentaries, the last two kind of cravings are attachment to sensual pleasures connected with the belief of eternalism, Sasatadithi, and that which is the connected with the belief or nihilism, Uchchededitti. Bhavavatana may also be interpreted as attachments of realms of form and Vibhavatana as attachments to formless realms since Ruparaga and Aruparaga are treated as two fetters, some yojanas. This craving is a powerful mental force latent in all and is the chief cause of most of ill of life. It is these cravings, gross or subtle, that lead to repeated birth in samsara and that which makes one cling to all forms of life. The grossest forms of craving are attenuated on attaining sakadagami, the second stage of sainthood, and are eradicated on attaining anagami, the third stage of sainthood. The subtle forms of cravings are eradicated on attaining arahantaship. Right understanding of the first noble truth led to the eradication, pahattaba, of cravings. The second noble truth thus deal with the mental attitude of the ordinary man towards the external objects of senses. The third noble truth is that there is a complete cessation of suffering, which is nibbana, the ultimate goal of Buddhist. It can be achieved in this life itself by the total eradication of all forms of cravings. The nibbana is to be comprehended, satchikattaba, by the mental eye by renouncing all attachments to the external world. This first truth of suffering, which depends on this so called being and various aspects of life, is to be carefully perceived, analyzed, and examined. Parineya. This examination leads to a proper understanding of oneself as one really is. The cause of this suffering is craving or attachment, tanha. This is the second noble truth. Dhammapada states, from craving springs grief, from craving springs fear. For him who is wholly free from craving, there is no grief, much less fear. Craving, the Buddha says, leads to the repeated birth, Ponobhavika. This Pali term is very noteworthy as there are some scholars who state that the Buddha did not teach the doctrine of rebirth. The second truth indirectly deals with the past, present, and future births. The third noble truth has to be realized by developing Bhavavitabba, the noble eightfold path, Aryatangika Manga. This unique path is the only straight way to Nirvana. This is the fourth noble truth. Expounding the four truths in various ways, the Buddha concluded this discourse with the forcible words: as long, O bhikkhus, as the absolute truth, intuitive knowledge regarding these four noble truths under their three aspects and 12 modes was not perfectly clear to me. So long I did not acknowledge that I had gained the incomparable supreme enlightenment. When the absolute true intuitive knowledge regarding these truths became perfectly clear to me, then only did I acknowledge that I had gained the incomparable supreme enlightenment. Anuttattara Sambodhi, and there arose in me the knowledge and insight. Unshakable is the deliverance of my mind. This is my last birth, and now there is no existence again. At the end of the discourse, Kondana, the senior of the five disciples, understood the Dhamma and attaining the first stage of sainthood, realized that whatever is subject to origination of all that is subject to cessation. Yam kinchi samudayadaham sabbam tam nirodha. When the Buddha expounded the discourse of the Dhammachakra, the earthbound deities exclaimed, this excellent Dhammachakra, which could not be expounded by any ascetic Christ, God, Mara, or Brahma in this world, has been expounded by the Exalted One at the Deer Park in Isipatna near Benares. Hearing this, Devas and Brahmins of all the other planes also raised the same joyous cry. A radiant light, surpassing the efflu- effulgence, effulgence of the gods, appeared in the world. The light of the Dhamma illuminated the whole world and brought peace and happiness to all beings. The first discourse of the Buddha, Dhammachakra Parivartana Sutra. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Exalted One was residing at the Deer Park in Isipatna near Banaras. Thereupon, the Exalted One addressed the group of five bhikkhus as follows: there are these two extremes, anta, or bhikkhus, which should be avoided by one who has renounced pavajitena. Number one, indulgence in sensual pleasure. This is base, vulgar, worldly, ignorable, and profitless. And number two, addiction to self mortification. This is painful, ignorable, and profitless. Abandoning both these extremes, the Tathagata has comprehended the middle path, Majjhima Patipada, which promotes sight, Chakku, and knowledge, Nana, and which tends to peace, Vyupasamaya, higher wisdom, Abhinya, eight, enlightenment, Sambodhya, and Nirvana. Mahavagya Samyutta Nikaya, Volume 5, page 420. Modern Sarnath, for in a former existence the master sacrificed his life to save a helpless doe and her unborn little one. The locality takes its modern name from the Bodhisattva who, in that ancient birth, was Sarnagantha, protector of the deer. Kama Sukha Likan Yoga, Atta Kilamathan Yoga. Literature, thus who had come, or thus who had gone. When the Buddha refers to himself, usually use this epithet. What, O bhikkhus, is that middle path the Tathagata has comprehended, which promotes sight and knowledge, and which tend to peace, higher wisdom, enlightenment, and nibbana. The very noble eightfold path, namely right to understanding, samma ditti, right thoughts, samma sankappa, right speech, samma vacha, right action, samma kammanta, right livelihood, samma ajiva, right efforts, samma vayama, right mindfulness, samma sati, and right concentration, samma samadhi. This obicus is the middle path which the Tathagata has comprehended, the Buddha continued. Now, this obicus is the noble truth of suffering, dukkha, ariya, satcha. Birth is suffering, decay is suffering, disease is suffering, death is suffering. To be united with the unpleasant is suffering, to be separated from the pleasant is suffering, not to get what one desires is suffering. In brief, the five aggregates of attachment are suffering. Subjugation of passions, realization of the Four Noble Truths, attainment of the Four Path and Four Fruit of Sensi. Panchapadanakakhandra. According to Buddhism, this so-called being is composed of five groups, which are like Rupa, matter, Vedana, feeling, Sanna, perception, Samkhara, mental states, and Vinana, consciousness. These are the five psychophysical components parts that constitute an individual. Matter is composed of forces and qualities. Mind too is composed of mental states. Cetasikas, they are 52 in number. Of them, Vedana and Sanna are treated as two distinct groups. The remaining 50 are collectively called Samkhara. Now, this, O bhikkhus, is the noble truth of the cause of suffering, dukkha samudaya ariya satya. It is this craving which produces rebirth, punnobhavika, accompanied by passionate clinging, welcoming this and that life. It is the craving for sensual pleasures, kama tanha, craving for existence, bhava tanha, and craving for non-existence, vibhava tanha. Now, this obhicus is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, dukkha, nirodha, ariya satya. It is the complete separation from and destruction of this very craving, its forsaking, renunciation, the liberation therefrom, and non attachment thereto. Now, this obhicus is the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, dukkha, nirodha, gamini, patipada, ariya satya. It is this noble eightfold path, namely right understanding, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. 1a. This is the noble truth of suffering. B. This noble truth of suffering should be perceived. Parinaya. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of suffering has been perceived, parinatta. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. Number 2, 1. This is the noble truth of the cause of suffering. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the cause of suffering should be eradicated. Pahattva. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the cause of suffering has been eradicated. Pahinam. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This is the noble truth of cessation of suffering. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the cessation of suffering should be realized. Satchikattava. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the cessation of suffering has been realized. Satchikattam. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This is the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. About number 4. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering should be developed. Bhavitabam. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. This noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering has been developed. Bhavittam. Thus, O bhikkhus, with respect to things unheard before, there arose in me the eye, the knowledge, the wisdom, the insight, and the light. Concluding his discourse, the Buddha said, as long, O bhikkhus, as the absolute truth, intuitive knowledge regarding these four noble truths under their three aspects and 12 modes was not perfectly clear to me, so long I did not acknowledge in this world inclusive of gods, Maras, and Brahmas, and amongst the hosts of ascetics and priests, gods and mans, that I had gained the incomparable supreme enlightenment. Anuttaram Samma Sambodhim. There are number one, the knowledge of the four truths, Satchanna. Two, the knowledge as regarded the respective functions of four truths, Kinchana. And three, the knowledge that the respective functions of each truth has been accomplished, Kattanana. Each truth consists of three aspects, thus four truths consist of 12 modes. When, O bhikkhus, the absolute truth, intuitive knowledge regarding these four noble truths under their three aspects and 12 modes become perfectly clear to me, then only did I acknowledge in this world inclusive of gods, Maras, Brahmins, amongst the hosts of ascetics and priests, gods and men, that I had gained the incomparable supreme enlightenment, and there arose in me the knowledge and insight. Nanada Sanna. Unshakable is the deliverance of my mind. This is my last birth, and now there is no existence again. Thus the exalted one discoursed, and the delighted bhikkhus applauds the words of the exalted one. When this doctrine was being expounded, there arose in the venerable Kondana the dustless, stainless, truth seeking eye, Dhammachakku, and he saw that whatever is subject to origination, all that is subject to cessation. When the Buddha expounded the discourse of the Dhammachakra, the earthbound deities exclaimed, this excellent Dhammachakra, which could not be expounded by any ascetic Christ, God, Mara, or Brahma in this world, has been expounded by the Exalted One at the Deer Park in Ishipatna near Banaras. Hearing this, the Devas, Katumaharijika, Tavatimsa, Yama, Tusita, Nimanrati, Paranimati, Tavasavati, and the Brahmas of Brahman Parisatya, Brahma Purohita, Maha Brahma, Paritabha, Apamananbha, Abhasara, Paritasubha, Apemanshubha, Subhakinna, Vihapaha, Aviha, Atapa, Sudasa, Sudasi, and Akanitha also raised the same joyous cry. The reference is to the fruit of Arahantaship, Arahantapala, Phala. Dhammachakku signifies any of the lower three paths Satupatti, Sakhadagami, and Anagami. Kondana attained the first stage of sainthood, Satupatti. The other bhikkhus attended Satupatti later. Yamakinchi Samudhyadhammam Shabhotam Nirodha Dhammam. Celestial beings of Devas and Brahma planes. Thus, at that very moment, at that very instant, this cry extended as far as the Brahma realm. This 10,000 world system quaked, tottered, and trembled violently. A radiant light, surpassing the efflu- effulgence of the gods, appeared in the world. Then the exalted one said, Friends, Kondana has indeed understood. Friends, Kondana has indeed understood. Therefore, the Venerable Kondana was named Annata Kondana. Some reflections on the Dhammachakra Sutra. Number one, Buddhism is based on personal experience. As such, it is rational and non speculative. Number two, the Buddha discarded all authority and evolved a golden mean which was purely his own. 3. Buddhism is a way or a path, Magga. 4. Rational understanding is the keynote of Buddhism. Number 5. Blind beliefs are dethroned. Number 6. Instead of beliefs and dogmas, the importance of practice is emphasized. Mere beliefs and dogmas cannot emancipate a person. Number 7. Rites and ceremonies so greatly emphasized in the Vedas play no part in Buddhism. Number 8. There are no gods to be propitiated. Number 9. There is no priestly class to meditate. Number 10. Morality, Sula, Shila, concentration, Samadhi, and wisdom, Panna, are essential to achieve the goal, Nirvana. The foundations of Buddhism are the four truths that can be verified by experience. 12. The four truths are associated with one's person, hence, Buddhism is homocentric and introvert. They were discovered by the Buddha, and he is not indebted to anyone for them. In his own words, they were unheard of before. 14. Being truths, they cannot change with time. 15. The first truth of suffering, which deals with the constituents of self or so called individuality and the different phases of life, is to be analyzed, scrutinized, and examined. This examination leads to a proper understanding of oneself. Rational understanding of the first truth leads to the eradication of the cause of suffering. The second truth, which deals with the psychological attitudes of the ordinary man towards the external objects of sense. 17. The second truth of suffering is concerned with a powerful force latent in us all. 18. It is this powerful invisible mental force, craving, the cause of the ills of life. 19. The second truth indirectly deals with the past, present, and future births. 20. The existence of a series of births is therefore advocated by the Buddha. 21. The doctrine of karma, its corollary, is thereby implied. 22. The third truth of the destruction of suffering, thoughts dependent on oneself, is beyond logical reasoning and supermundane, lokuttara, unlike the first two, which are mundane, lokya. 23. The third truth is purely a self realization, a Dhamma to be comprehended by the mental eye, Satchikattva. This truth is to be realized by complete renunciation. It is not a case of renouncing external objects but internal attachment to the external world. With the complete eradication of this attachment is the third truth realized. It should be noted that mere complete destruction of this force is not the third truth, Nibbana. Then it would be tantamount to annihilation. Nibbana has to be realized by eradicating this force which binds oneself to the mundane. 26. It should also be understood that Nibbana is not produced, Upadetabba, but is attained, Pattaba. It could be attained in this life itself. It therefore follows that thought's rebirth is one of the chief doctrine of Buddhism. The goal of Buddhism does not depend on a future birth. 27. The third truth has to be realized by developing the fourth truth. 28. To eradicate one mighty force, 8 powerful factors have to be developed. 29. All these 8 factors are purely mental. 30. 8 powerful good mental force are summoned to take on latent evil force. 31. Absolute purity, a complete deliverance from all repeated births, a mind released from all passions, immortality, amarta, are the attendant blessing of this great victory. 32. Is this deliverance of perfection or absolute purity? The latter is preferable. 33. In each case, one might raise the question, what is being perfected? What is being purified? There is no being or permanent entity in Buddhism, but there is a stream of consciousness. It's more correct to say that this stream of consciousness is purified by overthrowing all defilements. In the second discourse, Anattalakhamna Sutta. On one occasion, the Exalted One was dwelling at the deer park in Isipatna near Banaras. Then the Exalted One addressed the band of 5 bhikkhus, saying, O bhikkhus, Lord, they replied. Thereupon the Exalted One spoke as follows: the body Rupa, O bhikkhus, is soulless Anatta. If, O bhikkhus, there were in this a soul, then this body would not be subject to suffering. Let this body be thus, let this body be not thus, such possibilities would also exist. But inasmuch as this body is soulless, it is subject to suffering, and no possibility exists for ordering. Let this be so, let this be not so. In like manner, feelings, Vedana, perceptions, Sana, mental state, Samkara, and consciousness, Vinana, are soulless, the soulless stage. What think ye, O bhikkhus, in is this body permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, anicca, Lord. Is that which is impermanent happy or painful? It is painful, dukkha. Lord, it is justifiable then to think of that which is impermanent, painful, and transitory. This is mine, this am I, this is my soul. Certainly not, Lord. Similarly, O bhikkhus, feelings, perceptions, mental states, and consciousness are impermanent and painful. There are some footnotes like a permanent, unchanging entity created by a god or emanating from a Paramatma, divine essence. The so called being is composed of these 5 aggregates. Outside these 5, there is no being. If one removes the aggregates, nothing remains. A soul abides neither in any one group or aggregate, nor in all of them, nor outside them. The Buddha makes the same assertion as above in connection with each of the remaining 4 component parts of the so called being. The Buddha raises similar queries with regard to each of the other constitutes of being. The translation is abridged here. It is justifiable to think of these which are impermanent, painful, and transitory. This is mine, this am I, this is my soul. Certainly not, Lord. Then, O bhikkhus, all body, whatever past, whether past, present, or future, personal or external, coarse or subtle, low or high, far or near, should be understood by the right knowledge in its real nature. This is not mine. Nettam mama. This am I not. Ne suham sami. This is not my soul. Name suvatta. All feelings, perceptions, mental states, and consciousness, whether past, present, or future, personal or external, coarse or subtle, low or high, far or near, should be understood by right knowledge in their real nature as these are not mine, these am I not, these are not my soul. The learned Aryan disciple who sees thus gets a disgust for body, for feelings, for perceptions, for mental states, for consciousness, is detached from the abhorrent things and is emancipated through detachment. Then down on him the knowledge emancipated am I. He understood that rebirth is ended, lived is the holy life, done what should be done. There is no more of this state again. This the exalted one said, and the delighted bhikkhus applauded the words of the exalted one. When the Buddha expounded these teachings, the minds of the groups of five bhikkhus were freed of defilements without any attachment. With craving, Tanha, one erroneously thinks, this is mine. With pride, Mana, one thinks, this am I. With false views, one thinks, this is my soul. These are the three misconceptions, Mannaj. That is, they all attained Arahant. So, in this manner, this continues, and the rest of the class would be commenced yesterday. That's all for today. Thank you.